Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Leadership is Like a Box of Chocolates. Once again, I am one of the coordinators here with the Student Connection and Community team. I'm based on the downtown campus. My name is Rhodes Martin, and I'm joined by Chris. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I am Chris Watts. I am also a coordinator with Student Connection and Community, and I am based on the Tempe campus.
Yeah, so to continue on in our leadership series and everything that surrounds it, we're going to be talking today a lot about followership, what that means, how it impacts your student organization, and then how it impacts you as student leaders going forward into the world. So just to kind of get us a base started, Chris, do you want to just kind of give everyone an estimate of what followership is and then where we're going to be diving in from there?
Sure. So kind of just starting with a bit of a formal definition. Followership is a reciprocal process of leadership that refers to the willingness to follow within a team or an organization. Essentially, it is someone who has accepted the role of supporting and following the influence of a leader, whether that is someone in a position of leadership or just has more of that personal influence, the formal versus informal leadership, as it were.
Yeah, I think even to get started, just a good way for a lot of our viewers and people to think about it is this is not always who's leading your student organizations, but the people inside of your student organizations that are making everything happen, or at least assisting in these events that you're planning getting done.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on there. Followership is that beautiful thing of kind of the people that are there to bring the vision to life. A follower with nobody to influence, or a leader with nobody to influence, is not much of a leader.
Yeah. So the one thing I kind of want to question, Chris, and to go off of it is when you hear followership, I think a lot of people can get that kind of that fear initial thought of like, oh, blind following a leader and kind of the difference of that. So could you like dive into a little bit of like the different types of followership and what really goes into followership along with leadership?
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of flexibility here. One of the big things that comes up with good followership is that idea of acceptance of the role of follower, not acceptance of blindly following and accepting things without questioning, but accepting the role of follower, which in turn is about being an active participant in the process. If you are a good follower, you are someone who, last month we talked about that idea of the five leadership challenges, one of which was challenge the process. And you're comfortable with the role that sometimes as a follower, you need to step into that role of skeptic and work with your chosen leader to question a bit of the process. And so as a follower, there's different levels, but a good follower when it comes to followership is someone who has accepted the role and still remains an active participant in the process of functioning of the organization, of leadership. And sometimes that can play out a little differently. Working with a leader versus a manager oftentimes becomes a very different thing. Sometimes managers are going to look for more of that just blind acceptance of this, therefore that. When it comes to leader, you're talking about someone who is essentially looking to create a vision, create a dream that everyone can buy into. And so by stepping into that role of followership, again, you'll notice that I keep talking about stepping into because followership is an active choice. It's not something that you're just doing. It is an active choice that you have selected to be a part of this process because it is a process. You're leading towards a vision, your leader is heading for a vision or a dream. And so by being a part of that through followership, you are accepting your role. You'll still see bits and pieces of leadership come out in followership, as opposed to someone who's just, here's the checklist, let me do A, let me do B, let me do C. This is someone who is looking at the process and saying, you said A needs to happen. What does it look like to do that? Oh, I can get that up and running for us to make it a reality. Followership is an active and engaged process that still includes elements of leadership in it at times.
And I think what'll be good for our viewers to know is that like a lot of times, I think this was an adjustment period for myself as I was a student leader and everything when I was an undergrad. But when a lot of times when you're getting into the workforce and you're going into new jobs, you're obviously put usually at the bottom of the totem pole. So you're now having to adapt more to that followership to a leader if you want to work your way back up and to get to use those leadership skills that you're developing, is that you have to a lot of times become a follower in a new career or in a new field, something like that. And then versus with a student organization, you have a lot more of an opportunity to be an active follower and to do like to take what your leadership is saying and buy into it a lot sooner. Like in these student organizations, there's so much room for growth and for people to move up versus when you do get into your new careers, there it could be a look a little more like that managerial versus a leader type situation.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, kind of going from there, one thing I wanted to question you, and this one actually came from a different university's page on followership, but they had like 3 goals for a good leader. And those 3 goals were to be a great follower, to be a magnet, and then to create generational impact. And obviously, we're going to focus more on the first one of a goal for a leader to be a great follower. And just kind of your thoughts on that. And do you think it is important for leaders to have been followers first, or is it something that they can can assist with the situation?
Yeah. So you hear that idea a lot, the idea of being a good follower, and all leaders are good followers. Um, you may find some moments and situations where you disagree with that, depending on which type of leadership you aspire to, situational, et cetera, may come into play. But it comes back to that idea of, in most cases, the best leaders are the ones who have an understanding and a practice of things like sympathy and empathy. And if you have been and served in the role of a follower, it gives you a few different tools that in turn help you expand in your own leadership. One of those is an understanding of those you're leading. You know the processes and things that they're working through. You've had the experience of the challenges they're facing, the elements, and in some cases, the identities they're trying to balance, the pieces they're trying to bring together to create their own life as a part, including a follower within this space. And so having that experience gives you an understanding, a grasp on what it is to be a follower, for one. Additionally, it gives you a grasp on the challenges. Good leaders keep their followers in mind, which in turn offers a space and a place to develop the followers further. And this kind of ties into those next 2 points as well. But if you are facing an experience for you're thinking of our student organizations, if you're in an experience where everything is just driving people to either boredom or to just being worn out and unable to carry on, you're not really creating an environment that people are going to want to come back to. You use the phrase, I think, generational leadership.
Generational impact.
Generational impact. And generational impact is kind of an interesting thing because generations in this context look different. Within a university, within a student organization, a generation you may see a whole new generation within an organization in 2 years. You may see a whole new generation without the entire university within 6 to 10 years. So generation depends on the scope and scale of what you're looking at. And so this idea of a follower who understands the people, or who understands those around them in the environment they're working in and towards, seeing what the good leaders have done before them, and then taking that into the role of leader when they are prepared and step into that role themselves, really gives them kind of roots in where we're coming from, with the aspiration of where are we going and how can we make that road as smooth and as well built for everyone as possible.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I don't think necessarily you have to have been a follower to be a good leader, but a lot of it I think does come from that understanding that even if you're now the leader, like say, especially I'm thinking a lot of our smaller student organizations, a lot of them, they just started with nothing prior. So yes, you're being thrusted right into that leadership role in that student organization, but it's important to keep in mind when you're trying to get people to join your organization to take in and be followers, to understand what they're going through. And I actually think it's funny. I think this can tie to that Aristotle quote I had mentioned, which is, he who cannot be a good follower cannot be a good leader. And by this, I don't think that means that you had to have been a follower, but you have to be able to be one. Like you need to have the mindset of, oh, if I'm asking someone to do this, is this something that I would be able to do myself?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is sometimes you've got to be very careful with that, because sometimes you'll find folks get into the habit of, is this something I'm willing to do myself? And they'll say, well, absolutely, I'm willing to do it. I did it. Maybe it's something where they're like, I did this X number of years, semesters, months, whatever it was ago. I think the bigger way to phrase that is this something I'd be willing to do right now?
That's a good way to look at it for sure. Because yes, there also been things that you have done in the past that you didn't like, and you don't want to be like, oh, well, I did it then, you can do it now, and be like, well, you didn't enjoy it, so how can we change it to make it more acceptable for everyone?
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I just want to kind of keep going into followership and kind of so this is one that I heard from a colleague of mine, is that kind of looking at followership, is the leader always the one in the front, or is the leader always the one in the back? And I think that's just even a different view of like, where do your followers stand with you? And are they the ones making strides forward and you're leading them from behind, or are you the one out in front? Kind of the Western view of it, where you're out in the front and leading your followers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of an interesting viewpoint of who exactly is a leader, which is in a lot of ways how the idea of followership came up. And also how the term, if you've heard of it, servant followership came up. And servant followership, again, relating to my kind of formal definitions here, essentially is someone who has a deep consideration of the people around them, and they're focused on the idea of every cog in the system, essentially, being important. Again, it's still, servant leadership still uses the phrase leadership. It's that leading individual with that inward focus on the people. Followership is the people themselves with that outward focus and demonstration. So they're, again, kind of two sides of the same coin there. But coming back to that idea of, are you leading from the front? Are you leading from the pack, from the back, from wherever else it may be? And the question is, in some cases, the question is, what is the situation? Because there's certain situations where leading from the back maybe it doesn't seem very much like leading. And there's some situations where leading from the front doesn't necessarily seem like leading. So again, focusing a little bit on that situation, but then what is the role? Like, what is the impact that the leader is having? And in turn, how much of that impact is because of the people around them? Using kind of a perhaps a little bit out there example, the idea of musicians and their songwriters or music, whatever it may be, the people who bring all of that together. Yes, you get an incredible performer who may be the front-facing piece of the work, but how many other people are involved in that, from writing the song to any sort of performance details to recording, editing, and cutting the final pieces, all that sort of stuff that goes into a project or production like that. Who would qualify as the leader? Who qualifies as a follower? And what happens if any of that is missing?
Yeah, and on that, I think that's where you can see a lot of the most successful bands in history had a mix of those two things. I mean, one popped right in my head when you said that, is like with Queen and writing, like Freddie Mercury is obviously the front man, but a lot of the songs were written by the band, and then he's just given the vocals and is told to sing.
Absolutely, and he was definitely a great performer. But like you say, it's all the pieces that come together that made them the international phenomenon they were.
Yeah, exactly. And so, while we still very relevant today. While we talk about followership and kind of diving in and like accepting and figuring out your way, what do you think are good ways our members of our student organizations can do that? Like, maybe not focusing as much on the student leaders in this situation, but on our members of student organizations.
There's a variety of ways to do it, but the biggest piece I would recommend is take a risk. And I don't mean that like what you think of when you say take a risk. What I mean is, maybe, I say this as someone who is a bit of, I use the phrase introvert myself. Find a meeting or an event that you've never been to, and just, if it's open, go to it, check it out. Even if you're just standing around the edges hanging out, go see it, see what it's about. As a follower, even if it's an event your organization is putting on, even just having your presence there shows support for the leader and their vision. If you are if your organization is looking to create a large event, or an event in general, maybe bigger than they've done before, whether that means an event for 10 people or an event for 1,000 people, whatever it is. Are you willing to step into those roles that may be needed? Again, this is an active choice, but where are those moments? What are those things you're comfortable doing? Are you comfortable being hey, tell me what you need and I'll be there? Then be prepared. There may be a lot of asks of you. The other thing that I would say is when it comes to events, if your organization is putting on an event, if there's an event you're a part of, understand the event. This sometimes gets a little tricky where the event is happening, kind of the general focus of it, but could you walk someone through the event? Here's where this happens. Here's where you can do this. You go see this. This is happening at this time. And these are things that are usually very easy, hopefully a little easier to get the details on, talking to the person leading the event itself, maybe. Doing walkthroughs, that sort of a thing. Have you taken the time to go see those? Because then, one, it gives you more comfort and understanding of the event, a preparedness to even just be there as a participant, but it also gives you the opportunity to step in as that follower leader of, hey, I see this is going on. Can I help with that? Let me jump in here. If that's something you're comfortable with. And if that's not necessary, that's not needed.
Yeah, I think that right there, what you're bringing up at the end is a good one. And another thing I'd add on to that is understand why the event is happening. So that, because sometimes, like, say a person or a student is at your guys' event and he's just looking to be like, oh, why are you guys doing this? And you might be just working the event, but it still would be good for something for you to know. And I can think of some big examples off the top of my head is like, why do we do Passport? Why do we do Change the World? Why do we do Homecoming? Like, just understanding these large scale events or whatever small event that your club is putting on, and just understand like, oh, why are we doing this? What is the goal of the event? I don't have to be the one planning the event to understand what the goal of the event is. And yeah, and then even to go off back to what you were originally saying, I think a big thing for for those that are looking to join student organizations or have recently started following some is that changing that I'm just following a student organization on social media or on Sun Devil Sync or something like that to I'm actually going and participating in their events. And like you said, participating can be anything you make it. It can be really just getting the food, standing there and conversing or not conversing and just being present. Like, it's finding ways to be involved and kind of buying in, like showing that followership without just following them from a distance and really just observing more.
So I've got a question for you. Based on our conversation so far today, other than the idea of, we talked about good followers or making good leaders or potentially making good leaders knowing how to be good followers. Mm-hmm. Outside of that idea of perhaps stepping into a leadership role, why would someone want to actively choose to be a good follower?
I think a good reason to be a good follower is to kind of, I guess that's a tough, I would say it's going to depend a lot on your situation. But for me, the main thing, so if I'm joining a student organization, the reason I would want to be a good follower in the student organization is to show those around me and to improve my own personal experience on the organization I'm joining. I think that by being a follower and by buying into whatever I'm a part of, I will then improve my own experience and the experience of those around me so much more. They're going to get a lot out of me if I'm willing to just buy in and be that true follower. And then I'm going to get a lot more out of each event we plan and the different things my organization's putting on if I'm an active follower.
What's the old phrase, the idiom, you get you get out of it, what you put into it, sort of a thing?
Exactly. And I really do think it comes back to that. Is just like kind of, and that doesn't stop just when you're a follower. And I could say, there you go, there's a good reason of why you would be a good follower, is because then you take that skill of you get in what you get out, or you get out what you put in. And if you keep moving up and eventually become the leader, it's the same thing still applying. Like, everyone's going to, but I'd say with the leader, now you're trying to get others to buy in. So you really have to be focused on that goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, cool. I have one other quote that I'd like you to break down and see what your thoughts are on it. And it's from John Quincy Adams, our 6th president of the United States. It is, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. I just kind of want to know from that, do you think that kind of is in a sense saying that leaders should be inspiring others in that followership aspect? And do you think that's really what he's going on? Or do you think he's more just kind of saying like, you should just be out there doing stuff and making people believe in you that aren't actively in your organization?
So this is kind of an interesting quote, because my first thought when you started reading it is I'm sitting there going, how does this tie into followership? And I had a couple of thoughts on that. The first being this idea that a lot of people will break down leadership, perhaps maybe an oversimplification, but they define it as leadership equals influence, which is not a bad definition at all. It's a great starting point, and there is that impact, that influence. To me, leadership is action on that additional influence. And obviously there's more definitions and practical aspects, but that idea of the action really ties in well to the John Quincy Adams quote you shared, that idea of if you inspire these things in other people, that is what a good leader does, But then I had a thought, because one of the things we talked about earlier on was followership being that active choice to bring a shared vision to life. And in that sense, if we focus on that idea, does that make a good follower a good leader, according to this quote you've shared? Because if your leader is someone who has inspired this vision, this dream, gotten a number of people on board and excited for it, but then you as a follower are the one who maybe bring a certain aspect of it to life, make it a reality of this dream, by that definition, are you in turn also a leader?
Yeah, I would I'd say this kind of actually ties back into what we discussed previously of like the levels of leadership, because by being a good follower, you're choosing to buy into an organization, a program, a good leader, and someone that is doing something that you're like, okay, yes, I will buy into that, and I will do my part, be a good follower. By doing that and showing those actions of good followership, of like that, of what we were discussing earlier, you might be inspiring, as like John Quincy Adams was saying, someone that is maybe at the moment just an observer or someone from the outside looking in. Like they're like, wow, they're doing a lot of work over there, like just to help this event go on that they didn't even plan. And be like, huh, I can see like they look like they're having a good time, or the event wouldn't have been able to happen without them. And I enjoyed this event as just an outside observer. So just by, I think, buying in and being that follower, you in your own self take on some of that role of a leader. But it's more of that passive leadership, I would say, versus that out in front. Hey, I got the megaphone, I got the list, let's get it done, sort of stuff. Yeah.
Sure. I can't disagree with that. I think you're absolutely spot on, that idea of even and maybe that's the beauty of it, and why, like the definition that I read earlier on used the phrase reciprocal, is even in followership, you are in turn acting as a leader, influencing, affecting change, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean 100%. It's funny, I keep thinking of I don't know if you ever watched the show Home Improvement as a child, when they would turn around a home in like 1 to 2 days, like the whole home. And like one of the things is like everyone there, yes, they're not all the leads of the show, they're not the producers, they're not the one doing it, but they all had to buy in and be an active follower for that house to get made, like for the common goal. So
especially also recording a show with Tim Allen acting along the side.
Exactly. And so what my point is when the family shows up, or someone shows up and they look ahead, they might not just view Tim Allen as the leader. They're going to view everyone there as like, wow, thank you. Look what you did. Like you got it done.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
So whether you're planning a small event or building a home, I'd say it's important to buy in and show that followership in something that you're passionate about. And like Chris was saying, be willing to take a risk and go a step further than just being that outside observer, and be an active follower.
I love it.
Yeah. Anything else to add?
I think we've got a good start here. I'd love to hear kind of maybe in the comments, folks' thoughts on followership. Is followership a type of leadership? What they think on that. So
cool. Well, yeah, with that being said, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I mean, life or leadership is like a box of chocolates. Not life, leadership is. And Thanks again. Yeah.